Tell us about where you grew up, and tell us about some of your. Were you born an entrepreneur? Is it did you? Tell us about the first job you ever had.
Sure. So I was born in New Jersey. So I'm from the East Coast. I spent a lot of time in New Jersey.
We brought them in a bus.
They're usually not that proud of that, but nice to hear. I spent a lot of time in Vermont. Went to college in Vermont. My first job was mowing lawns for the neighbors. Then I upgraded to working at the Gap. And then I was a ticket taker. Yeah, it was great. I was a ticket taker and an usher at a concert venue in New Jersey for a while. So those were my first 3 jobs.
And what were you? So you started mowing lawns. Do you feel like you're one of these people that was born an entrepreneur? Is it something you kind of discovered along the way?
I mean, I don't know if I was born an entrepreneur. I was born the kind of person that really wanted to control my own time and not really. I really didn't enjoy reporting to someone else. So I kind of always tried to find ways to do my own thing.
Yeah. And when you went to college, tell us about where you went to college, what you studied, what you plan to do.
Went to Middlebury. I got a degree in neuroscience. So I was planning to become a doctor. I had a sort of romanticized vision about what that would be, helping people and saving lives. And there's a big part of that that's being a doctor. But the reality set in when I spent some time at Duke University in the medical center, and my then mentor took me downstairs to the lunchroom where all the medical students were having lunch, and they all had their heads buried in books. And he asked me one question, and he said, "Which of these people looks happy to you?" And none of them did. And so I spent some time talking to the med students and some doctors, and was convinced that I didn't want to become a doctor.
And so what was the next step? You'd been studying. I mean, you were receiving your degree in it. So what next?
So what do you do when you get a degree in neuroscience? I decided to drive to San Francisco and be unemployed for a while. So I ended up in San Francisco with some friends, and I lived there for a while, and I needed to get a real job. And the only real job that I applied for is the one that I got, which was being a biotech analyst at a private equity fund called Investor AB, a Swedish company that was looking for someone that they thought could read scientific reports and help them understand kind of what drugs would make it to market, and I sufficiently duped them into thinking I was their person.
And so was that here in the Bay Area, or where did you go?
That was in New York City.
New York City.
And spent some time in Stockholm, and was so miserable in August in New York City in a suit that I immediately knew that I'd be finding a new job.
And so did that lead to Burley, or did you do something else in between that?
So I spent a few months there, but I knew immediately I'd do something else, and I really didn't like the idea that I had to be in at a certain time, and I had a boss who would tell me, and that would be mad when I would stroll in at 10:30, and he would say, the market opens at 9:30, and I would say, oh yeah, I know, and I just kind of go to my office, and they were not happy with that, so I started to think about starting my own company, and I researched a whole bunch of ideas, like a magazine and a travel company, and but it was 1997 at the time, and if any of you have the chance to start an internet company in 1997, you should do it.
If you can go in a time machine, that's the best time.
That was a great time to start a web hosting company. And honestly, I had never taken a computer science course in my life. I just went to Barnes & Noble, which, by the way, is a bookstore, for those of you who don't know.
East Coast based?
East Coast, yes. It was on the East Coast, and I bought an actual book about computer science, and I read it and decided that I would start a web hosting company.
And was it just you? Did you have co-founders?
It was just me and my credit card and a lot of debt.
In your apartment or something? Or?
I moved out of New York City. I rented an apartment in Burlington, Vermont, which is where I was familiar with, and the rent was a lot cheaper. And I ordered some servers from Dell on the phone, and they showed up, and I decided to start a web hosting company.
And so how long did it take to get the initial product ready?
Probably 3 months of honestly, really lonely, difficult times where I felt, a lot of SpaghettiOs, a lot of sleeping under the desk, and just a lot of introspection about whether this is actually going to work or not. But I think they say, necessity is the mother of invention, but, fear is the kind of, invention of the entrepreneur. It was just the fear of having to move back home or declare bankruptcy was very motivating.
And so, did you had enough cash saved, or you're funding yourself?
No, I had no cash. I had credit cards, And I applied for a whole bunch, so I got a bunch.
Perfect.
And if you're going to do that, do it all at the same time, because then the other companies don't know that they're all issuing you cards.
That's smart.
And then I was fortunate to have some family and friends that either believed in me or are really bad investors, and they gave me some money. Basically, there was no web hosting companies. There were no software, so I had to write the software essentially, which I did, and that was
Front end, back end,
all of it.
everything.
DNS server, you name it.
Wow.
But no one else was really doing this either. Others were starting at the time, and so I wasn't really behind the curve. So I figured even if I'm average or below average, this is going to probably work out okay. And yeah.
What book did you get? It sounds like it was a really good book.
Good question. I don't remember.
Okay, so do you remember your first customer? Do you remember launching the first product?
I do. I built our website, and we were going to be half web design and half web hosting, and the day I learned to make a rollover button work was like a great day for me. And actually, our first customers were tough to come by, because who wants to pay in 1997 for a website from someone they've never heard of? And most of them didn't have websites. So what I did was I went door to door and said, if I build you a website and host it for free, can I tell other people that you're my customer? And I did that for probably 10 or 15 people that all said yes, and like from then on, the rest paid.
Wow. And your Burley, what is that? What does that mean exactly?
It was just,
Am I saying that right?
Yeah, I was just looking for, we had to register a domain name that wasn't taken, and it was in Burlington, so I just made up a word and it worked. Kind of like Google. That worked better though.
That one's decent. When did you, so you launched the product, you get 10 or 15 customers. Did you then say, hey, this is going to be this huge success? Like,
I knew immediately it was going to be great. No, I had no idea. I thought it was going to be the whole time until the day I signed the papers to sell it. I thought it was could be a disaster, like terrible. I mean, it was like a very fear is a big motivator, and you get confidence as you get customers. But frankly, when you have the weight of payroll on you, you've got 50 people or more they have families and paychecks, and I mean, we never missed a payroll, but it was close sometimes, and that's a lot of responsibility, and you have friends and family that put money into your company. My advice is usually don't take money from friends and family, because that makes it very personal, and that it takes a lot out of you.
Yeah. Do you remember the first person you hired, the first 2 or 3 people you hired?
For sure, yeah. They're actually really good friends of mine.
Still today?
Yeah, still today. We went to college together, and I knew them, trusted them, liked them. And
more doctors, or?
No. They one was a philosophy major, another was an English major. We all were unemployed, so needless to say.
And at what point did you move out of your apartment? When did you move into an office?
We were getting, this is, remember, 1.0 web, and so we were getting buyout offers from the first few months from Charter Communications and a lot of now bankrupt companies who were offering us hundreds of millions of dollars, and I'm on the phone next to my bed thinking, you don't really know what you're talking about. You might want to come visit first.
And do diligence.
Right, do a little diligence. And so it actually stayed in my apartment for the first year. Then we rented the next level above, which was another apartment, and expanded into that. Then I moved out, and then we built an actual data center, a real facility after that. But there were all kinds of adventures prior to that happening.
You're still in Vermont?
Yes.
Did you feel a disadvantage by not being in the Valley? I mean, at that time, it's crazy everywhere, but it was especially crazy here. Did you ever feel this pressure, like people feel today, I got to move to the Valley? Or did you, you made it happen in Vermont of all places.
Right. Yeah, I really like it there. It's beautiful, and the people are nice, and the city is a really nice scale. It's not that different from Palo Alto in that way, but it was a lot easier to own the market there too. And it's where I was, it's where my business was and my friends. And
it's what you knew.
Yeah.
Tell us about, do you remember one of the bigger failures you had, or something that, the end of the story is, which we're going to hear, is it ended up being a big success, but did you have any failures along the way that you could share with us tonight?
Yeah. A doctor once told me that you don't ever want to go to a surgeon that can't tell you about any of his mistakes, because that's how you can tell it's a good one. I mean, I've failed a lot. I mean, the first one that pops into mind is, this is a minor one. When we expanded into the second level of this building, we were interviewing to hire people, so we set up a desk, and we thought it looked really nice. A desk, an African violet, a little Post-it note pad, and it was going to
totally hired me.
It was going to be great. And so someone came in for an interview, and they said, Bill, they're upstairs if you want to go talk to them. So I go upstairs, and that person isn't there, so I'm looking around, and this was someone we were really excited about hiring. And it was a woman, and I look on the note, it's on the Post-it note, she wrote a note, I don't think this is the workplace for me. And I looked around, and it did look really weird when you looked at it. It was this empty room with just a desk and a plant. And so I called the person who brought her in, who had been in touch with her. I said, could you call her and just ask her if she wants to come back in and kind of what happened? And he called her and he said, she thinks we're making pornography here, so she doesn't want to work for us. Well, that was a failure.
Which you weren't.
Yeah, no, we were not. No, definitely not. So. But there are lots of there are big failures. I mean, getting the servers to work, and the power goes out, and the roof leaks, and things that you can't predict. And when you're running basically a web hosting operation out of a residential complex, which is not exactly legal, you can't call the landlord and say, hey, the roof is leaking, and I have all these servers, and we're going to set the building on fire. So you have to fix the roof yourself. And so there's lots of things like that, big and small, that went right and wrong. And I think the biggest one was in 2000 when we were set to sell the company. And I had literally it was going to be a great sale for us, because this was 2000, things were going great. And I had used the oncoming proceeds from the sale and bought everyone in the company a BMW. I thought, this is going to be a great surprise. The trucks are pulling up to the building.
Before it closes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right before the close. And now this is if I remember right, this is March 6th of 2000, which is the day the market fell apart and went into total meltdown. And then the company that was going to buy my company called to say, you know that sale, that's not going to happen.
Wow.
So you're on your own. So I had to send the trucks away, and everyone is in the windows going what are all those cars?
Had they heard about it? They knew about it.
Well, they figured when all these BMWs showed up, something good was about to happen. So I not only had to tell them...
It could have been a flash mob or something.
It was I ruined the day in a way, I had to tell them, not only are we not selling the company,
someone gets a car.
But you were going to get a BMW, which you can see in the parking lot, but now you can't have it. So that was a tough day, because we had to really, it's funny now, but we had to look inside and say, do we have what it takes to double down and keep at this for another few years?
Wow.
Or, is it time to call it quits? Which we didn't do.
So what happened? So tell us when Web.com came along. What year was it? How many employees did you have?
Yeah, 2002, the company was at scale. It was doing well. It was profitable very early on, which is, I always say it's easier to control expenses than generate revenue. So we ran it to be profitable. And so we were fine being on our own. And it was clear that Web.com was going to be kind of the last good train leaving the station. And the choice was going to be sell the company now or put in another 5 or more years and really scale it to a much larger operation. And now I was frankly just bored at that time. The company was running itself, making money, and I was not required. And that was a signal to me it was time to do something new.
Talk about that briefly, because the market crashes, you have this offer, and then you, unlike the vast majority of companies, survived and thrived. What set you guys apart from these other people? What did you guys do that made you survive through that terrible time?
We tried to run an actual business that sold something, that made money, that got more money than it spent, and that actually remarkably helps you keep it going. So it's not that difficult, but at the time I was under a huge amount of pressure from people to build data centers all over the country and expand and take down deadlines, and a lot of companies went out of business in our industry after having done that. And I chose not to do that, but a lot of it, I'll be completely honest with you, is dumb luck. And if you can choose between being smart and lucky, pick lucky, because there were a number of places where I could have gone wrong had I not hired the right person or taken the wrong advice. that things could have gone off a cliff, and they didn't, and that put me in an incredibly fortunate position, just like all of you sitting here, just by the fact that you're here, are incredibly privileged, kind of the scale of the world, and it's important to remember that.
So you get acquired in 2003, is that right?
We sold the company in 2002, and then I stayed on to help them with M&A and data center roll-ups and through the end of the year, but they sort of knew that I was planning to depart.
You were going to leave.
Yeah.
Tell us about the first time you met Sergey and Larry, the founders of Google. How did you meet them? When was it? Where were you?
So it was like 98, 99. I was king of the world with this giant company, and my friend Ann Wojcicki said, these two guys have just started a company in my sister's garage. It's a web hosting company, and so I met them that way. And the first time I met Sergey, he was on rollerblades, and granted it was the 90s, but I don't think those were ever
Literally,
cool.
they were blades.
They were never cool.
Rollerblades.
Yeah, no, he was actually on rollerblades.
Was he wearing the pads and stuff?
No pads. No.
Living on the edge.
Still doesn't. And they were very much like they are now, sort of out-of-the-box thinkers and engineers and very technical. And it was an interesting conversation because here were two guys that had no business experience, no business plan, no revenue, no plan to get revenue. Seemed like, I don't know, it doesn't seem
Night
like
and day from you, right?
such a great idea, yeah. And so I had this actual business, and it became clear over time that Google was starting to take off. But observing their journey from that perspective has been really interesting.
I mean, seeing them in that garage, was it clear to you? Was it like,
no?
What was
no,
it?
if it were clear, I would have thrown it all away and moved back to California. It was absolutely not clear that it was going to become this. I'd be on a giant super yacht right now if it were clear. It wasn't that clear.
I most likely would not be with you
right
now.
Probably not.
So how did that relationship evolve over time? What did you just keep in touch with them casually? Did you kind of watch them? Because you're on the other side of the country, right?
Yeah, we stayed in touch, and I came out to California now and then, and we became friends basically. And most of your important relationships in life are important, sort of deep relationships. So we developed a friendship, and they learned about my business, I learned about theirs, and then Ann and Sergey started dating, and that was an interesting twist. And well, now obviously, those of you that don't know, they're married, and here we are.
So then fast forward us to 2009, is that right?
I came to Google, so basically I sold my business and just started thinking about what am I going to do next. And Larry and Sergey and David Drummond in particular, who's Google's chief legal officer, were thinking we need to do something around startups and investing that has an actual strategy around it. We've done some investments, but if we're going to keep doing this, let's do it in a more thoughtful way. Do you want to come and help us with that? And that was late 2007, 2008. Was when I came to Google and spent 6 or 9 months kind of thinking through, talking to venture capitalists and startup people about what could we do in this industry that might be a little bit different, if anything.
And what did you come up with? What conclusions did you get?
So, my conclusion was that doing what Sequoia and Kleiner is doing is great, but if we replicate that on our best day, we'll get 1/3 of the deals that we would be looking for. So, and that wouldn't actually even be that interesting. We have a really unique resource. We called it Google Ventures for a reason, because there are 50,000 people at Google who are expert in things, the largest compute infrastructure in the world. I mean, you can kind of go down the list of special resources that we could unlock for entrepreneurs that might help their companies become something they never would have been without that resource. And it just started with the question, what would I want from Google to take Google's money or Google Ventures money when I was a startup person? And let me make that wish list, which is what I did. And then Rich Miner joined and helped me flesh out that list. And I showed that to David and Larry and Sergey and Eric, and they said, okay, wish is granted, go ahead.
And so where did you start? What did you?
I mean, I started out at Google, literally.
It was just you, right?
Yeah, it was just me, and I was sitting at a desk in open workspace, just in the corporate development department, just an anonymous desk. And actually, this will be the second time in my career that I sat next to someone who later did quite well. And there was a guy who sat next to me at the time who was working on a little app. He was in the corporate development department thinking about doing a startup, and had this little app called Bourbon that he was working on. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, but he's like, well, I might switch it into something else. And then he left Google and switched it into something else, and that something else became Instagram, and that was Kevin Systrom. And
he was just randomly sitting next to you.
Yeah, he worked in Google's corp dev department, and we didn't have a venture fund at the time, so it's not like I wish we had invested in that. I wish we had, but we didn't have any money to invest.
Yeah. That's like a very typical story for Silicon Valley, right? Like you end up sitting next to someone or someone in your company, or if you're kind of in the pool long enough, right? I mean, have you had that experience over and over again here?
It's just a relation. It's all about relationships and getting to know people and finding smart people and working hard. And if you meet enough people, some of them are going to hit on the right combination.
So the types of companies and the way that you were investing, very data driven, right? Using Google's network of employees. Anything else that kind of set it apart that you said, hey?
We've built out a number of teams internally to help startups solve problems, from marketing and communications to engineering, technical recruiting, so helping startups hire engineers. Areas that were really different: product design, development, user research. Areas that, as a startup entrepreneur with just one or several people, it's really hard to have the expertise or even the money to hire those people. So we've built out a team of 60 people at Google Ventures that spends the majority of their time trying to help our startups solve those problems. And a lot of it is data driven. I mean, it's Google Ventures, so we spend a lot of time thinking about data, and but a lot of it is also relationship and instinct driven. So you want to invest in people that you know and that you trust, and so it's always a mix of those two things.
Where do most of the deals that you all look at come from? Do they come through those relationships? Do they, like, what percent would you say, if you would even know, or would come from Googlers? What percent would come from your partners? What percent would come from the website or somewhere else? 100%
of them, 100% are referred, meaning it's either someone we know or someone who we know knows someone.
Yeah.
They're never cold calls. They're never mailed in. They're never kind of in the inbox.
Attack you at an event at the end.
No, yeah, at the end of an event. But I mean, it's just, you need to have some sort of screen, right? You're getting thousands of these a year, and so the most effective one. I always make the analogy to dating, for example. If you have a choice between a blind date and someone who tells you, well, I really know this person and they're really awesome, you're going to probably choose the person that is referring someone. And so we have to use some screen. So they're all referred. Lots come from inside of Google, because you can imagine with 50,000 people, everyone's
they're referring a lot of people.
They're referring a lot of things, and a lot are from our personal networks of entrepreneurs we've known over the years who've started things and are going to start other things.
What's interesting to you all right now? What are you seeing that you're taking a better look at? What are you focusing on in terms of startups?
So each of the people on our investing team has a little bit different of a focus, but the kind of macro trends are probably somewhat obvious, like mobile, big data, things of that nature, data security. But I spend a lot of my time, and others on the team, at the intersection of life sciences and technology, because I think what 1970, 71 was to the transistor, 2003 is to life sciences, which is when the human genome was mapped, and you're about to see a huge acceleration in what is possible in life sciences over the next 10 or 15 years. So, and it also has the dual benefit of feeling really good to invest in companies that want to cure cancer. So that's kind of a nice side benefit.
When you're in a couple of you sit on the board of a couple of these companies, 23andMe, the Climate Corporation. What specifically about them, is interesting to you?
So Climate is not a life science company, but 23andMe certainly is, and Foundation Medicine, and we just invested in a company called Synaptics. Started by a guy who I know from a past life, who started a company called SciTech. SciTech developed a way to screen pap smear slides in an automated way rather than having to have individuals look at each cell or each slide and the cells in them. And Synaptics is developing a blood test for autism, which initially sounds like, well, how is that possible? But when you spend time with the team and look at the technology, it's not impossible, and we're really excited about that one.
Talk to us about Nest. We had Matt Rogers a couple of months ago. We've had several of your partners speak as well. But talk to us about what's special about Nest. What are you excited about?
Sure, I'm on
Nest?
the board of Nest, so I'm a little biased.
Sure.
I think Nest. I mean, my hope is that it becomes the next great consumer electronics company. They've developed. They came into pitch. Before they came into pitch, in all honesty, I was told that they've developed a new kind of thermostat, and I said, "Do I really have to come to this meeting?" So
you didn't know who it was, or did you?
No, I didn't know who it was. I just knew that there's a new kind of thermostat, and it sounded like, yeah, Betamax. I'm not that interested in those kinds of things, and they said, well, no, it's Tony Fadell and Matt Rogers. Here are their bios, and I knew Tony by reputation for sure, and others on the team did as well. And so that's what catches your attention. It's really about who's doing it rather than exactly what they're doing. And Tony, is basically created the iPod and all kinds of important things at Apple, and so it was worth the meeting. And we went, and then when you see the pitch and what the ambition is and what they've developed, and that it doesn't just stop at the thermostat, and you look at how little innovation there has been in that in the last 40 years, then it starts to click.
On that note, why don't we talk about what you see in founders that you look for? What are traits? What are things that you look for within founders, or things that you see repeated again and again in good founders?
I mean, that's a tough one because they're all really different. Some founders have like a certain amount of arrogance to them, which can be a real turnoff. I mean, I probably did when I was 22, honestly. I thought that I was just gonna conquer the world, and you kind of have to think that on some level, because if you don't believe in yourself, then why would anyone else? Especially when you're asking people to come work for you. Yeah. Larry and Sergey had that kind of a little bit of arrogance as well. But there's a point where it crosses a line where a lot of the traits you're looking for are also the traits of insane people, right? It's like you're looking for incredible persistence and focus, and you're not going to give up, and even in the face of overwhelming odds. And when you sort of look at those on a piece of paper, you could be describing a really scary person, or you could be describing a really great entrepreneur. But at the end of the day, we're looking for people that are nice people that you're going to work with for years. So life is short, so you want to find good-hearted people that want to do something good in the world, that share your values, and will treat you and their employees the right way.
So do you find that the people that come into your office to pitch, they either get funding or they get removed by security or something?
No.
I mean, does it turn out that
that happens
some of
sometimes.
them are crazy, this guy's crazy, he's in the crazy group?
It's so hard to tell. The line between crazy and genius, it's really difficult to tell. And if you had met Larry and Sergey in 1990, if you met them today, you might think these are crazy people, because some of their ideas Elon Musk talks about the hyperloops, and
crazy.
If he hadn't been successful, you would say, well, this could be a homeless guy. It's just mumbling to himself, right. And who knows? But if they're referred in, and they've done things before, and so look, some founders are really shy, and some are really outgoing, some are funny, some are quiet, and usually they'll find someone to work with a lot of times that will bring out the other best qualities in them. And I think Larry and Sergey have done that, Chad and Steve did that, etc. Do
you see any correlation between baldness and either crazy or genius?
None yet. Okay. Ask me, I don't know, in 10 years, I'll let you know.
Okay. So you guys have a lot of money under management. I mean, a lot. And you all have said this publicly. You have a $1.2 billion under management. How in the world do you go about spending that much money? I mean, how do you even manage?
Well, hopefully we're not spending any of it. I'm hoping we're investing all of it. The key difference.
What about that? The yacht you guys didn't work. Yeah. Okay. So how do you manage investing that much money? I mean, your past is not one of an investor; it's one of an entrepreneur. So that kind of brings a very unique perspective to it. Tell us about
let's just go through the math is pretty straightforward. We do 50 to 70 seed investments a year. Those investments are usually under $250K. So high number, a lot of effort, but not huge dollar amounts in a relative sense. And then we'll do 15 to 25 investments a year in the millions of dollars, or maybe into the tens of millions. And then maybe we'll do 1 or 2 investments a year that go into the high tens of millions, or maybe even larger than that if we see like a late stage opportunity we like. And we started out with this model actually that Rich and I came up with. Rich Miner is one of our investing partners. He is the co-founder of Android. And we thought, well, we're going to make a bunch of investments in early stage things that will take some time to pay out. But we want to demonstrate that we can actually make good investments so they don't shut us down very quickly. And so we invested in Silver Spring Networks, which just recently went public, as a way to balance the portfolio. So you have a lot of early stage risky investments and this one sort of de-risked investment that won't return 1,000x, but it will return at least the entire fund. And then the rest will be kind of gravy on top of that. And that was the model, and that's worked quite well. We've invested in other later stage companies like HomeAway, etc.
What does the future of Google Ventures look like? 2, 3 years from now, 5 years from now?
I mean, if you had asked me at any point in my life, what does it look like for you in 2 or 3 years, I would have been so wrong every time. So I could give you an answer, but it will probably be wrong. Hopefully it's, I have extremely high hopes. There's a really great team that's been put together. We're really excited about the portfolio, and I really love the people I work with. So I can only think it will be better, but even 2 years ago, to think we'd be investing $300 million a year would have been hard to believe.
Let's talk to us a little bit about Google for Entrepreneurs. Where did this idea come from? What is the purpose of the program? It sits within Google Ventures.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about it.
So Google Ventures invests only in the U.S. That's really our focus, and we're just getting our arms around that. But Google is a global company and touches entrepreneurs all over the world, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs. And innovation isn't limited to this country, right? There are people in Pakistan that are trying to set up startups, and I've met a bunch of them, where there are bombs going off around them. There's a lot that Google can do and can offer those companies, and it made a lot of sense to David Drummond and myself and Mary to try and organize all of the efforts Google has to help entrepreneurs that are not direct investing. So in the US and outside of the US, we do a lot. We spend really tens of millions of dollars a year not in direct investing to try and help entrepreneurs get where they need to be and access tools at Google and people and provide facilities. Campus London is a good example, or space to have events like this. And we thought, well, we can also make partnerships with groups like Startup Grind. And it just seemed like it made a lot of sense to organize those literally hundreds of efforts going on inside of Google under one umbrella. And this is, I'm really proud of that team and all that they've done. So it's a great place for them.
Tell us about a few that you talked about Pakistan. Tell us about a few of the things or places you've been that you've been impressed with or even surprised with. Just
to be clear, I have not been to Pakistan. Lots of people have, but I haven't been there.
Right.
But I know people on our team have.
We have a chapter there.
Yeah, it's amazing. I read the reports coming back, and it's amazing the sacrifice people will make to start companies. And it's really what it's about, I think, at least what it was about for me, is trying to make a better life and be in control of your life and provide for your families. And it's remarkable to see those stories coming in from places like Pakistan and Israel and London and all over the world, really.
Yeah, the thing that's been remarkable to me is that in the last year, we've had about 350 people request to start a chapter, and it is like I've lived outside the U.S. for 8 years, and I am shocked by the places they come from. We had someone in Palestine. We've had people literally in every corner of the earth, and it's just like entrepreneurship and this desire for people to solve their own problems and get their families out of difficult situations through their own work. It's this kind of universal principle that seems to be happening everywhere.
You asked earlier about why we started Google Ventures. That's one of the reasons. Google exists in part because it got venture funding. And completing that circle of the ecosystem, Google is an incredibly fortunate company, right? A capitalization of hundreds of billions of dollars. And there's a responsibility that comes with that. And investing back into the ecosystem that was so good for Google, our view is that can probably only benefit us to bring hundreds of entrepreneurs to campus and hear their ideas and see their energy, we thought that would be a positive thing, and I think it's proved out to be true.
Let's give Bill a big round of applause. Let's do a couple of questions from the audience. If you've got one, raise your hand, and if you're close.
We have a tradition at Google called TGIF, where on Fridays, Larry and Sergey get on stage, and you can ask them anything. They don't answer everything. They try their best, but there's some things you can't say. But they listen. And so in that tradition, if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them as best I can about Google Ventures, Google for Entrepreneurs, Google in general, life.
And maybe, why are we here? Let's take yours, and I'll just repeat them so we can get them on camera.
Yeah, I'm playing around with Google Glass. Are you guys making investment in glass companies? And what do you see in the future?
Are you making investment in glass companies?
Yeah, we have a thing called the Glass Collective, which is a really, it's a kind of a co-working group amongst us, Andreessen Horowitz and Kleiner Perkins, where we've committed to invest in promising startups that are building applications or hardware for glass. So yes is the answer. And there's actually a website, glasscollective.com, that details all that.
And then how big is that fund, or how big is that pot?
It's actually not a fund. It's just a commitment from the three funds to work together and evaluate together any startup that comes in around glass around this kind of seed stage is going to get looked at by all three of us, and then we each make an investment decision on whether we want to invest or not.
How maybe you could just talk on that point. How separate? You guys are not on the main campus. You're kind of off. You have a building kind of off.
Oh, you make it sound so sad.
Well,
not that bad.
Adar. No, it's a very nice
We're
building.
right here on Charleston. We have our own building. So Google Ventures, we make our own investment decisions. We hire our own people. But it is Google Ventures, so we have badges. We eat in the cafes, and our friends are Googlers. But the reality is that we're happy to invest in things that are competitive to Google. We're not investing to help Google's products. Google's doing great on its own. But the really intentional reason the intention in setting up Google Ventures was not to find ways that small companies could help Google do things. That always seemed backwards to me when I was trying to raise money from Intel Capital. Works for them, so it's a great model. But our model was the reverse of that. How can Google, with all of its resources and all of its great fortune, help small companies and startups that we've invested in be successful? And so we sort of jujitsu'd that around.
That's cool. Yeah. Melanie, go ahead.
Hi, I'm trying to start a company that just uses Google Business Apps and Google Chrome as the platform, and it's been incredibly difficult to figure out how to use it, because I read there's a feature, but it's like, how do I turn that on? Do you have a resource for people? I mean, I've spent tons of hours trying to learn these things.
That doesn't sound like it's working well. So the question was, what you can repeat?
Yeah. Well, do you all invest in companies that are built on top of Chrome or Google Apps?
We do, but
and how can startups that want to build there, how can they be supported?
We do, but to the specific question, which was, it sounds like you're spending a lot of hours on a technical problem, which is
like 40 hours today, and I finally called an engineer today and spent.
That's the right person to call.
$200 just to figure out how to do the basic steps.
So
How are they doing?
So that doesn't. I don't know what that was, but
maybe that's that engineer.
Maybe there is. Yeah.
I've been listening.
Maybe it's the NSA. Who knows? So that doesn't sound like it's working well. So why don't you connect with someone from the Google for Entrepreneurs team who's seated over here at the end, and see if we can at least help you not waste time on that problem.
Yeah, right there.
Sure. Okay.
I have a question about how closely you work with the foundation, Google.org, and like investing in say social entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs, and then that mission with Google.org, if there's an overlap.
How closely, Google Ventures specifically?
Yeah.
How closely does Google Ventures work with Google.org?
So we know all the people at Google.org extremely well, but their mission is different from ours. Theirs is philanthropy and around some very specific areas, and they have some great people that I love working with there. But founders who are looking to raise money to create a commercial enterprise come to us, and it's usually a lot of NGOs and nonprofits that work with Google.org. So there isn't a lot of overlap, but there's a lot of communication between us and them.
Yeah, go ahead.
What's the biggest challenge? Totally open-ended, hardware, software, life sciences, that you wish somebody would come to you with a solution for?
What's the biggest challenge that you wish someone come to you
Oh,
with a
that's
solution
easy.
for?
The same that it's been since 1997 when I started, which is HR. I mean, hiring, keeping people happy and motivated, trying to make as few people cry in your office in a week as you can. The real reason like most businesses, is a people business, especially in venture, and none of us want to disappoint someone. So we try to start with yes and make people happy. And so really keeping the team motivated and happy is really the biggest challenge. So and then finding qualified people. I mean, I always say we try to hire people, not roles. Like we try to hire the right kind of people and they'll find something good to do. And that's really difficult. And then once you have them, I mean, you're spending 8 or 10 hours a day with them. So you might be spending more time with them than with your family in some cases. So it's, you want to make sure you've got a good, productive, healthy, happy workplace. And that's I think, always the challenge.
Yeah, right here. Go ahead.
Do you invest in prototypes or an idea, or usually something that has already been made and they already have users and customers? What level do you use it?
What stage of the product do you most often invest in? Is it the prototype? Is it the ideal stage? Is it the
All
product
stages.
stage?
We've invested over a cup of tea with someone with just an idea because it's a known entrepreneur to us and we want to be part of what they're planning. And we've invested in very late stage companies that have a product built with thousands or tens of thousands of customers. So the stage isn't important to us. It's more what's the ambition, the scale, and who are the people working on it.
So I'm a little unclear about how the people resources work. Do I come to you with a pitch and say, hey, I need this kind of person to help me out? Or do you guys volunteer that? How is that done?
Within Google Ventures?
Google Ventures, yeah. And are they, do I think of them as consultants or a team?
So this entrepreneur is asking, how do I approach getting in front of your team?
So if you're an entrepreneur and you're in our portfolio, if I understand the question correctly, how do you marshal the resources that I outlined that we have? And the answer is it's very organic. You get to know the people on the team, they'll spend time, and it'll become clear to us and to you what your biggest priorities are, whether it's hiring engineers or you're about to launch a product, you need help, how do I talk to reporters? It becomes obvious. When it's not obvious, that means we just need to spend time together. And the team at this point is expert at sort of figuring those things out.
So of all the investments you have, there have been some of them that have failed.
Never.
No.
Never.
Well, so the other question doesn't exist, but the question is like, what are the signs that you look at when something starts to go wrong and how do you deal with that?
So the question is, well, what do you do when something goes wrong and a company fails? And I think we've got 180 or something like that companies in our portfolio now. And I don't know the exact number. Fewer than 10, though, I would say, have failed. And when I say failed, I don't say it flippantly. These are people who invested time and money, and maybe our money was the least precious thing they were investing. Their careers in building something, and it didn't work out. And it's important to be respectful of that. So we're not ashamed of the people or the companies that didn't make it. It's really hard to do what these entrepreneurs are doing, and it takes a huge amount of luck. And I'll cite one statistic, which is, and I'll get the numbers roughly wrong, but I'm roughly right, but the specifics wrong. If you start a company that's venture funded, the odds of you succeeding to a positive exit are something like 18%. If you've never done a company before. If you've done a company before and you've succeeded, the odds of you succeeding are roughly 30%. So not quite doubled, but significant increase in likelihood. And then you think, well, what if I've started a company and failed and I try again? Is there a penalty? The answer is that it's basically like 19%. You like revert to the mean. So there's no real penalty for failure. So if someone's done a startup and they haven't succeeded, they've learned something. And they probably won't make the same mistakes again, at least. So
Yeah.
that's how I'd answer it.
Great insight. Let's do 2 more and then we'll wrap up. Sure.
What's the biggest difference between Google Venture and the traditional VC firm in terms of like investment strategy and the value you bring to entrepreneurs?
What do you feel is the biggest difference between Google Ventures and a traditional venture capital?
I mean, our approach is really different, right? We've got 60 people across, product and design and engineering. Most of our investing team are technical. They're engineers. They have technical background, or they're entrepreneurs, or both of those things, or have deep vertical knowledge about an area. And we started this from the ground up. There are not many examples of new venture funds over the last 5 years. And the scale at which we're trying to do things and the scale that we bring to the companies we've invested in is like vastly different, I would say. I'm not saying that it's better. If like John Doerr wanted to invest in my company, I would probably say yes to him. But this is not a competitive business in that way. We're trying to bring something different, not instead of, to our startups.
Okay, last one.
Make it a good one.
Can you talk about some of the reasons why Google Ventures focuses just on the U.S. for now, and potentially you think that might ever change?
Why is Google Ventures currently focused on U.S. only companies?
Sure. Even at Google scale, there's only so much that you can do in a certain amount of time, and it's taken a lot of effort to get to this stage. And again, I'll cite some statistics which may actually be apocryphal, but they're in my head, which are something like 80% of venture returns globally are in the U.S., and something like 80% of those are within like 20 miles of where you're standing, and Boston. And so we have an office in Boston. We have people in New York. But if you're looking for a needle in a haystack, go to the haystack where the most needles are, and that's here. And there's innovation everywhere, which is why we have Google for Entrepreneurs. But when you invest overseas, you introduce currency risk and political risk, and there's all kinds of policy issues that come up around the local geographies. And this is a personal business. You need to be able to go to board meetings and know the entrepreneur. So there's a lot of examples of VCs creating satellite offices and failing at it. So we wouldn't do that until we felt confident we had people on the ground that could be great at it, and we're not there yet.
All right, let's give Bill one more big round of applause.
Thank you. Thanks.